The music is supposed to be rolling, the vibe already set, but the entire room feels like it's malfunctioning. She's staring at the board, talking to her producer as if the cameras can hear the panic. Laptops, screens, the live button, everything is happening at once. And the one rule she keeps repeating is the one that makes people lean in closer. Make sure they know everything is allegedly. That word lands like a warning because the title alone is already explosive. And the internet is treating it like a verdict before the story even begins. The transcript doesn't open with proof. It opens with tension. She's fresh off a trip, laughing, bragging, warming up the room, and then you hear the shift. The moment she finally says the names, she knows will set the comments on fire. Funky Tamar. Not even the story, yet just the promise of it. Like lining up dominoes before flicking the first one. The chat starts buzzing, patterns being counted. The same question whispered over and over. How many times does Funky end up in a public fallout with a black woman who once stood close to him? Then, like a file dragged onto a screen, she pulls the audience backward to the moment that started the chaos. The post, the injury, the blood, the teeth. The kind of details that quiet a room because they're too vivid to ignore. Tamar wakes up in a pool of blood. Teeth knocked out. A fractured nose. As the comments flood in, people choose sides. Some call it an alibi. Others say the details are too specific to be coincidence. And the most dangerous part isn't a direct accusation, it's how the story is framed. Not as fact, but as what was said, what was heard, what allegedly came from private conversations. Because once a narrative like this starts moving, it doesn't need a courtroom to turn into a conviction. Just as she promises to get to the truth, the screen cuts. The room resets. The question hangs in the air like a threat. If DNA talk is the headline, what's the real story waiting on the other side of the break? When the live resumes, the energy is shaky, the kind you only get when everyone knows the topic is bigger than the jokes. She laughs, talks about vacations, about staying offline, about refusing to indulge family drama over the holidays. But the way she keeps circling back to allegedly makes it feel less like comedy and more like legal armor. She says it out loud, almost ritualistically, like she's reminding herself as much as the audience. That's where the documentary tension locks in. The title reads like a final answer: DNA, test positive. Denial issued, but the transcript itself is a slow burn. Not evidence neatly laid out, but messy papers pulled from a folder while she warns. I'll get there, just understand the machine first. She opens with chaos and confidence, reminding everyone she's back. Refreshed, armed with exclusives and wine. Entertainment is the hook. Because entertainment is how she keeps people listening long enough for the darker parts to land. Then the tone shifts again. Court comes up. A quiet win is mentioned, brushed off as inevitable. But the details she drops are the kind that make other creators feel the floor move beneath them. Because this isn't just gossip anymore. It's pressure. And once that pressure builds, the story doesn't just unfold, it detonates. She starts talking about subpoenas. Records, logins, phone data tools that turn a private life into evidence. She describes a moment when someone went to a judge trying to access email records, phone records, passwords, logins, even carrier data across multiple networks. And she tells it like a door got slammed shut. Not just a win, but a warning. Because there are people who don't just want to argue with bloggers, they want access to your phone. She delivers it with this smug, adrenaline-laced confidence. Proud she survived the attempt, but also signaling that she understands the game at a level most viewers never will. Lawsuits can be dragged back up, she says, but time keeps moving and her platform keeps growing. The message is clear: paper doesn't scare her anymore. That posture matters. Because when she pivots to Funky and Tamar, she does it as someone who believes she knows how narratives turn into lawsuits. She knows which words to avoid, when to say allegedly, and how to talk around claims while still making the audience feel like they're hearing something forbidden. Then she starts warming the crowd up to the real subject. She says Funky's name early, almost as a test, watching how the room reacts. And her framing isn't neutral, it's frustration, disbelief, disappointment. She starts counting without calling it counting. How many black women have been dragged? How many have been used? How many stood beside him before the fallout hit? She paints it as a pattern without ever labeling it one. She says she almost reached out, almost sent sympathy until she saw something he did that stopped her cold. And that's important. Because this documentary isn't just about Tamar. It's about trust, betrayal, How a friend turns into a headline. She lands a line that cuts like a dagger wrapped in sarcasm. Friends don't throw getting to know you birthday parties. In her version, he's reframing the relationship to manage optics, not loyalty. And even though we don't see the comments, they're embedded in her rhythm. She's responding to a culture of watchers who already think they know the story on. She's feeding that culture knowingly. Then she shifts the temperature. She pulls the audience into the Tamar timeline, not with a clean sequence of events, but through memory, tone, voice, and receipts. She says Tamar went online after throwing Funky a birthday party at VLive. She describes his mood as visible, wearable, something you could feel in the room even before the scandal. She adds her opinion about why he's always in a mood, keeping it framed as behavior and attitude. And then comes the real pivot, the injury post. She doesn't paraphrase it. She has Jasmine read it like an exhibit in court. Suddenly, it's no longer floating gossip, it's exact language placed in front of the audience. I was found in a pool of blood. I fractured my nose. I lost some teeth. That becomes the anchor. And once that anchor is set, every theory has somewhere to attach. She explains that Funky got upset because people accused him of hurting Tamar. He also got upset because, in his view, Tamar didn't move fast enough to clear his name. Then she offers Tamar a defense. Tamar didn't know people were dragging him. She had no clue. And then she drops the detail that reshapes the dynamic entirely. She spoke to Tamar personally. She positions herself as someone with proximity, not just commentary. But she doesn't frame it as a clean defense, she frames it as a messy human conflict. If you're Tamar injured, weak, disoriented, you're not scrolling the internet tracking who's being blamed. And if you're Funky, hyper-aware of reputation and narrative, you feel abandoned the moment the internet points at you and the person closest to you stays silent. That's where the thriller tone deepens. Because this isn't about what happened yet. It's about what people think happened, Dan, how fast those thoughts. Hardened into facts in the comments, she adds another detail that sticks. She says Funky claimed the only conversation they had was Tamar calling for Dr. Heavenly's number to fix her teeth. In the transcript, that becomes symbolic. A friend saying he's being dragged and a friend asking for a dentist. It's mundane, almost petty. But it's exactly the kind of detail people cling to because it feels real. The way insiders hint, viewers speculate, and he said, she said, gets recycled starts to feel like confirmation. The audience wants a clean answer, positive or negative, real or fake, guilty or innocent. But the transcript refuses to cooperate. It's messy. It's mood and reaction, backstory and subtext, orbiting one central incident that keeps being reinterpreted. That's where the documentary lens locks in on the most dangerous moment, when people don't actually have the full record, but build a case anyway, piece by piece, fragment by fragment. Then she plays the clip that changes everything. The mood sharpens instantly. Funky speaking directly, uneasy, detailed, framing his words as observation rather than accusation. She doesn't present it as debate. She plays it like evidence. Funky says he felt uncomfortable. He describes Tamar sitting on Mendeecees' lap, kissing in the car. He says he went home. And then he drops the line that raises the stakes. The people who went upstairs with her, he says, were Mendeecees and his friend. So if anyone knows what happened to her teeth, it would be them. He never claims he saw what happened upstairs. He frames it as logic based on who was present. But the way he says it lands like a conclusion. Names are pointed to directly. And once that happens, the internet reaction becomes inevitable. It doesn't matter how many times allegedly gets added. The clip will be cut, posted, repeated like a headline. A weapon you can't put back once it's out. Tasha's tone shifts immediately. She starts describing Funky as the type who waits for the right moment to drop information. She frames his behavior as a pattern, how he drags people, how he moves through conflict, how he aims at followers and podcasters. She's not proving anything. She's characterizing him as someone who stores ammunition. Then she tightens the focus back on Tamar and sharpens the thesis. She says she believes the original injury post functioned as an alibi, that it was meant to create confusion to frame Tamar as alone with a friend. So there would be no possibility she'd been with Mendeecees. Not an accident, but a strategy. She admits she doesn't feel sorry for Tamar, bluntly, which immediately fuels backlash from people who want a clean victim narrative. But even as she says that, she undercuts the idea that Tamar deserved what followed. She says Tamar didn't really drag Funky. didn't name him. And that Funky is the one escalating because he expected public defense while Tamar was dealing with a physical crisis. That's where Section 1 ends on the edge of two realities running at the same time. One reality is physical. The injury, the blood, the teeth, the fear. The other is social. The blame, the silence, the rage, the sequence of events, the clip that now lives forever. When those realities collide, the story stops being about what happened in a house and becomes something colder. Who controls the narrative when everyone is watching and everyone is ready to convict before the next clip even loads? Once that clip circulates, the room changes. Even though it's still the same live, the laughter thins. The jokes slow down. Because Funky's words make the story directional. Names are attached. Timelines are implied. And suddenly, every viewer is being asked to decide what they believe before the facts ever settle. Tasha doesn't rush past that moment. She sits in the discomfort. She lets it breathe. Instead of cleaning it up, she pulls the camera back and widens the frame. She reminds viewers this didn't start with a DNA rumor. Didn't start with Mendeecees' name in the comments. Didn't start with Funky's clip. It started with silence and the way silence gets weaponized online. In her view, Funky expected loyalty in real time. Not private loyalty, public loyalty. The kind that arrives fast enough to stop a narrative from forming. When that didn't happen, he felt exposed. Abandoned. She frames what followed not as a calculated rollout, but as a psychological breaking point at the moment he decided he was done protecting anyone but himself. And that's when she introduces the idea that matters more than any single accusation: sequence versus aftermath. Tamar speaks in aftermath, fear, shock, confusion. She never walks the audience through the night itself, never lays out the order of events. Her post anchors people to the damage, not the cause. And because damage is visible, it becomes believable instantly. Funky operates on the opposite side of the spectrum. He speaks in sequence. The car ride, the body language, who sat where, who went upstairs, who didn't. His story moves step by step, and step-by-step narratives sound convincing, even when they're incomplete. Tasha doesn't declare one version true and the other false. She says they're speaking in two different narrative languages, and the internet consistently rewards one of them more than the other. She reminds viewers that when accusations against Funky first surfaced, Tamar was physically and mentally in no position to monitor backlash. Tasha emphasizes that she genuinely believes Tamar didn't even realize he was being dragged at first. But from Funky's perspective, that context doesn't matter. Public damage spreads in real time. It doesn't wait for recovery, clarity, or explanations. Then Tasha moves into darker territory, not criminal motive, but emotional motive. She argues Funky didn't explode randomly. Timing matters. She frames it around health scares, stress, medical bills, algorithms, relevance. When people face life or death moments, she says, they start reevaluating who they've been protecting and why. And sometimes that reevaluation turns into confession, not because it's right, but because it feels necessary. This is where the documentary sharpens. She isn't asking whether Funky should have spoken. She's asking why he spoke now. Without naming names, she issues a warning. Celebrities who sat beside him, laughed with him, shared space with him should pay attention, not because he's lying, but because he's no longer invested in silence. She describes it as a shift from friendship to survival mode. And when survival mode activates, secrets stop feeling sacred. Then she pivots back to Tamar and, not gently, she says she doesn't feel sorry for her. Not because she believes Tamar deserved anything, but because she believes Tamar understands the chaos she moves in. She frames it as a long-standing pattern of messy environments. Blurred boundaries, alcohol-fueled nights that end in confusion. Legally, she's careful calling an opinion, rumor, what people say, not verified fact. Still, the implication lands hard. This incident didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a lifestyle where lines were already thin. She returns to the injury post again. It's time reframing it as strategy. She says she believes the post functioned as an alibi intentionally or not a way to position Tamar as injured. Vulnerable and alone with a friend, muddying questions about who she was with. The goal, she suggests, wasn't permanent deception, but disruption. Slow the narrative. Let the heat cool. This is where the audience fractures. Some viewers, based on her tone and pacing, are nodding along, connecting dots, replaying clips, building timelines. Others are furious, hearing victim blaming dressed up as analysis. Tasha doesn't comfort either side. She leans into the friction, because friction keeps people watching. She reminds viewers that no one in this story is actually claiming Mendeecees. Neither Tamar nor Yandi has publicly framed him as a prize. He exists more as a catalyst than a central figure. The chaos isn't about desire, it's about optics, proximity, what it looks like to be seen, where you shouldn't be seen. Then she returns to Funky one last time, not with a new clip, but with analysis of his posture after the clip. She says he doubled down. He sounded lawyer-ready. Like someone who knows he's crossed the point of no return. She questions whether a lawsuit would even happen, not because she knows the outcome, but because she understands how expensive truth, or alleged truth, becomes when everyone involved is bleeding money at the same time. She frames it like a chessboard, where no one holds a strong position. Tamar is physically injured and publicly scrutinized. Funky is emotionally raw and publicly exposed. Mendeecees is named without speaking. And the internet, always the loudest player, impatient, angry, and convinced it already knows the ending by the time Section 2 settles. The DNA angle from the title still hasn't been addressed. That's intentional. Because before any test, any confirmation, any denial, the real damage has already happened in the narrative space. Reputations have shifted. Alliances have cracked. And once stories like this become entertainment, truth becomes just another clip competing for attention. The story now balances on an uncomfortable edge. If this much chaos exists before concrete proof enters the conversation, what happens when someone finally claims they have receipts that can't be talked around? At this point in the live, it's no longer about one night. It's about exposure. What happens when private behavior collides with public storytelling and no one involved fully controls the narrative? Anymore, Tasha leans into that loss of control. She reminds viewers, sometimes subtly, sometimes bluntly, that nothing in this space stays contained. Once a name is spoken on a live, once a clip is cut, once a theory feels emotionally satisfying, it no longer belongs to the person who lived it. It belongs to the audience. She returns to Funky's decision to speak, not to dissect the words again, but the posture. He didn't just sound angry, he sounded relieved. Like saying it out loud lifted something heavy. She frames it as the kind of relief that comes when someone stops caring who gets hurt. As long as the pressure eases, then she introduces the idea that pushes this section fully into thriller territory. Leverage. Not proof, not evidence. Leverage. She suggests Funky has been sitting on stories. Moments, details he never planned to share, not because they were false, but because sharing them would have burned bridges he once needed. After illness, stress, backlash, and feeling unprotected. Those bridges no longer matter the same way. She doesn't accuse him of threatening anyone. She doesn't claim extortion. She frames it as something quieter and more dangerous. Willingness. In internet culture, willingness is enough. She warns again that anyone who's been close to him should recognize the shift. Because once someone stops being careful, even old jokes and offhand comments can turn into receipts in the court of public opinion. Finally, she pivots back to Tamar, focusing not on her injuries but her silence. Tasha points out that Tamar hasn't gone line by line to dismantle Funky's sequence. She hasn't replayed the night. She hasn't contradicted the car ride, the seating, the upstairs detail. She stayed anchored in the aftermath. And that choice, intentional or not, creates space. Space for theories to breathe. Space for other versions to grow louder than hers. In scandal culture, silence is never neutral. It's interpreted, filled in, weaponized, especially when the person speaking is confident, detailed, and already commanding the room. Then she drops another reminder from earlier in the live, one that feels less like gossip and more like strategy. She talks about how quickly bloggers and creators become targets when stories involve powerful names. How subpoenas, phone records, and legal pressure aren't abstract threats, but real tools she has personally seen used. The subtext is clear. No one in this story is dealing with emotion alone. They're dealing with risk. That's why the word allegedly keeps resurfacing. Not because it weakens the story, but because it keeps the storyteller alive. From there, she moves into what feels like the moral fracture at the center of the situation. People keep asking whether Funky is a bad friend, but she reframes the question entirely. What does friendship even mean when fame, content, and survival are tangled together? She suggests Funky and Tamar weren't operating under normal friendship rules. They were operating under proximity rules, events, appearances, visibility, Proximity creates expectations, and when something goes wrong, those expectations explode. She doesn't ask the audience to judge. She holds up a mirror. Many viewers, she implies, would react exactly like Funky if their name was being dragged while the person closest to the situation stayed silent. And many would react exactly like Tamar if they were injured, scared, and suddenly responsible for protecting someone else's reputation while trying to save their own. Neither role is clean. Neither choice is safe. She sharpens the tension again by returning to Mendeecees, not as a speaker, but as an absence. He hasn't spoken in the transcript. No denial, no confirmation, just silence. And in this environment, silence becomes strategy, whether it's intended or not. Once Funky said his name, the burden shifted. Even without proof, even without a statement, that name is now attached to a moment that can't be unseen. No one is publicly claiming him, defending him, or fighting over him, which makes the situation feel even stranger. He's central to the accusation, but peripheral to the conversation. A shadow figure moving through other people's narratives. By this point, the audience isn't just watching a breakdown. They're watching a system at work. How stories escalate. How silence and speech collide. How timing matters more than truth in the first 24 hours of a scandal. As this section winds down, Tasha makes one thing unmistakably clear. Whatever actually happened that night may never be fully known publicly. But the damage created by the sequence, the post, the silence, the clip, the commentary, already real. In this space, confirmation doesn't always come from DNA tests or official statements. Sometimes it comes from who speaks first and who sounds like they're done protecting anyone by the time the live reaches its final stretch. The energy shifts. It's no longer explosive. It's heavy. Like everyone involved has realized this story has crossed a point where it can't be neatly undone. Tasha's tone slows, becomes more deliberate. She stops sounding like someone reacting in real time and starts sounding like someone closing a file. Not because the truth is clear, but because the damage has already settled. She circles back to the title idea without ever treating it as confirmed reality. The DNA talk. The claims, the denials. No test is produced. No paperwork is shown. Instead, she explains how easily the idea of confirmation spreads once an audience is already primed. Words like confirmed, positive, or denied shut down nuance. People stop asking who actually said what and start arguing as if a verdict has already been handed down. This situation, she says, is a perfect example. What the transcript contains isn't proof. It's reaction layered on reaction. Tamar reacts to injury. The internet reacts to Tamar. Funky reacts to the internet. Commentators react to Funky. And somewhere in the middle, Mendeecees' name is pulled into a narrative he hasn't personally spoken on at all. That's how reputations get reshaped without a courtroom. No sworn testimony. No cross-examination. Just sequence, tone, and timing. She returns to a theme running underneath the entire live control. Tamar lost control the moment she woke up injured and confused. Funky lost control the moment his name became the internet's suspect. Mendeecees lost control the moment his name was spoken by someone else instead of himself. And she frames the real tragedy not as scandal or betrayal, but inevitability. When people move in overlapping circles filled with alcohol, attention, unresolved tension, and blurred boundaries, something always breaks. Sometimes it's bones. Sometimes it's friendships. Sometimes it's narratives that were never meant to be spoken out loud. She makes one thing clear. She doesn't believe a clean ending is coming. No matter what test exists, no matter who denies or confirms what, the audience has already made up its mind in fragments. And fragments are harder to fight than lies because each one feels personal to the person holding it. As the live winds down, she reminds viewers this story isn't about heroes or villains. It's about timing, about who spoke first, about who stayed silent too long, about how quickly private chaos becomes public currency. She leaves the audience with an unsettling truth. Even if the full story never comes out, even if no definitive proof is ever shown, the narrative has already done its work. In this era, you don't need certainty to destroy trust. You just need enough doubt, spoken at the right moment, by someone who sounds like they're done protecting anyone at all. After laying everything out, the silence. The reactions, the timing, the question becomes unavoidable. What actually mattered most? The injury post that set everything in motion, or the moment Funky decided to stop protecting the narrative and speak in detail? Did Tamar's silence protect her, or did it create space for other voices to take over her story? And what about Mendeecees? Does silence look like strategy here, or like someone already trapped inside a narrative they didn't build themselves? Drop your theories in the comments. Not just who you believe, but why. Was it the specificity of Funky's words? The emotional weight of Tamar's post? Or the way the internet rushed to confirm something that was never officially shown on screen? This is one of those stories where timing mattered more than truth and reaction mattered more than facts. And those stories don't end cleanly. If you're watching this and something still doesn't add up, you're not alone. That's where the real conversation starts.